Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm Amanda Aguilar, co-founder of Elefant. I'm a CPA in New Orleans, but I also do training for folks on Xero and other technology and practice management. I know a few of you were on the starter session, so welcome back. We're going to do part 2 on sales and purchases. So this is the second of our 4-part series on Xero. It is not advanced bank rec. I apologize. We are in sales and purchases. So here are the learning objectives for sales and purchases. We're going to talk all around getting money and giving money. So that's the gist of it. I'm going to show you different ways to manage your invoices, get those out to clients, and then how to process payables, including check payments. And we'll even look at billable expenses as well. So let's get over into Xero. So this is our dashboard where we left it a few minutes ago if you were on the first session. We're going to go to our business and sales overview. So this is our invoices dashboard, our receivables dashboard. It's a snapshot of receivables. There are lots of buttons that we'll go through, but I want to point out these buckets. So there are 4 troughs of receivables here. Draft and awaiting approval on the left. Those are different levels of not yet finalized or not yet sent invoices. Draft is exactly what it sounds like. It is just kind of waiting. It's not finished yet. And so we've maybe created something and saved it. We don't want to lose our work, but it's not final. Awaiting approval would be if we had a different user who has created an invoice and then a different, second user has to approve it. That would be awaiting approval. So neither of these impact the general ledger. That's the most important thing. These are just waiting. Awaiting payment is the general ledger balance. So awaiting payment is the sum of all outstanding receivables on at any given date. And then overdue would be a subset of awaiting payment where they are past the due date. In our case, we had our really old invoices that we imported in as part of our conversion and setup. So right now they're all showing that they're overdue, but really it's a subset of awaiting payment. Underneath, we can see an image of our receivables by month, and we can actually hover over them to see which ones are due. And as I mentioned, anything in Xero that's blue, we can click on it. So you could click on it and get into the underlying invoice that makes up that number. I'm just going to hit my back button to go back. So this is a timeline of receivables. Next to it would be either a list or a chart of the clients that owe us the most money. So I don't use this very much as an advisor, but I do know that my clients do pay attention to these graphics. It's nice for them to be able to see something very clearly without having to dig into a report or a financial statement. A couple of things up at the top I do want to point out. Probably the most one of the most used ones is the search button. So if we do search, we can search for invoices based on amount, invoice number, invoice contact. When you start using Xero heavily, before you know it, you'll have hundreds of invoices, and sometimes it's hard to find the one you need. So search makes it pretty easy. Before we start to create invoices and quotes, let's take a second to polish up how they look. This is one thing that I hear pretty much from every client that we set up on Xero is I want my invoices to look nicer, especially because we have a lot of law firm clients. Law firms are very particular about how their invoices look. So let's look at invoice settings. So back under our organization name and settings, we will see invoice settings. And this block that we ignored in the last hour, if you were on, shows us this is the brand theme for the invoice. The standard brand theme is the default in Xero, and it creates an invoice that is useful but not very pretty. So we want to create some good looking invoices. We need to create an additional brand theme, and we're going to do that by this pull down, and we're going to create one that's a custom.docx, a Word document. And we're going to call this new island logo theme, just so it's clear that this is one that's pretty, and when we create our invoices, we'll be able to select it. Let me show you what this Word document looks like that we're going to upload in here. I will tell you first, if you want to create a good looking invoice, it is a little bit of a process. So I'm putting in chat the help menu for how to do this. You just need to sit down and work through it. It is not the most intuitive thing in the world, but it's not difficult either. It just takes some time. So let me find the file so I can show you what I mean. So here is our Word document that we are uploading, our Word file. We're going to upload this into Xero, and this is going to create beautiful invoices for us. So it is a Word document. It can be manipulated a lot, similar to other Word documents that you've used in the past. However, these fields are merge fields. So the way that you insert additional fields or manipulate additional fields, you can't just like type them in. You got to insert them. I'm going to show you quickly how to do it. But again, this is something, if you want to do, you block out some time, you turn off your phone, and you sit down for 45 minutes and do it. So it's the fields live an insert, quick parts over here, quick parts, field, and then merge fields. And the link that I just sent over to you in the chat menu will show you the fields that you can add. So again, it's a little bit of a process, but it's worth it to generate good looking invoices. So let's go ahead and upload our new template. So in our new branding theme, I'm going to go to upload, and I can create a specialized document for each of these. In our case, we're just going to do it with the invoice. So I'm going to browse, select my custom invoice, and upload it. Thomas, I see your question, and we are going to talk about that in a little bit. All right, so that is, now we've got a fancy invoice. So let's go create some stuff. So business and sales overview, we're going to create a quote, and then we're going to convert that quote to an invoice. All right, so using our pull down menu, new and quote, and show you how to create a quote that we're going to turn into an invoice. So let's do a new quote. We're going to send this out to our customer. He's going to approve it, and then we're going to automatically make it an invoice. So our customer is James Buffett. He's in our system already. And we have our default date is today. Expiration, we can say, well, he's got, let's say 14 days to decide. So I'm going to use the plus 14. These are global shortcuts in Xero in the date fields. If I use a T in tab, it'll put today. If I do plus a number, it'll add those number of days to the date before it. So it's a couple of shortcuts for you. This is going to be his Mardi Gras setup. We are going to create Muddy, is the extremely dirty island pool cleanup. So he probably needs also some chlorine. So we are using our data entry shortcuts. These are the ones that we uploaded in the last session if you were there. All I did was type in, for this one, I typed in the MUD and it filtered, and then it auto-populates all this for me. So this is the use for untracked inventory. Now, as I go through the screen, you'll notice there's a discount column. I do want to point this out because I think it's important. We can put a percentage here, and we can say that, you know, he is getting this discount. And if you notice, what that does is it just takes the quantity times the unit price less the discount and books that net amount to the GL account, okay? In real life though, I prefer to show the discount separately because I want the client to, two things. I want the client to notice that there's a discount for them. So I want them to see the value of what they've gotten. They've gotten something for 400, but we're going to give them a discount underneath. And then also I might want on my financials, going back to our talk about the roadmap and thinking ahead for reporting, I might want to segregate out the discounts that I'm using. So I actually do this in my firm. Anytime I give a discount, I book the entire amount and then I back out a discount line. So let me call this preferred customer discount, and I'm going to fill in a dollar amount, negative dollar amount. And then I don't think we have, let's see if we have a discount one set up. Nope. So I can actually add a new GL account directly in an invoice. So I don't have to get out and go to my chart of accounts. I can just go to this add account, and I'm going to actually do, it's going to be a revenue, it's going to be a contra revenue account. I'm going to create one called customer discounts. I'll save that. And now it's the same net effect of discounting the invoice, but it will show as a separate line, and it'll show as a contra revenue on my income statement. So let's send this invoice out, and it's going to go to Elefant training, and yes, we're going to send it. Sent to James Buffett. And if I go over to my, let me open the right Gmail account, guys. Give me a sec. Google is switching me over to other accounts. So let's pull up the right fake Gmail account so I can show you. Here is the email that James Buffett got for the quote that we just sent. So let's open it up and see what it looks like on the client side. So he's gotten this email. Here is your quote. You can view it online via this link. So let me see that. And here's our quote with our totals and then our discount. And from this place, he can accept it. If I scroll up, he can accept it, he can decline it, or he can comment. If he comments, Xero is going to send me an email with his comments. So that's how I'll get notification about the comments. We are going to accept the quote. So James is going to accept this virtually. And if I go back to Xero and go back into my sales overview page and dashboard, I can see down at the bottom, quotes accepted. So all this has happened automatically or electronically via email. My client has accepted, and now Xero knows that it's ready to be converted to an invoice. So if I open it up, I can click the button to the left and go to create invoice. It's very simple, create. So now it's just taking all that data and flipping it over into an invoice. I do not need to type anything, no data entry, just flipping it over into a new invoice. And I can, I'm going to select our new fancy invoice so you can see what that looks like. New Island logo is the branding theme. So this is where we would make that selection, and I will approve it. So now it is in the awaiting payments bucket. I'll show you that in a second. I do want to show you what the invoice looks like, so you can see what this custom invoice looks like. So this is the invoice template that we uploaded with all of the information relevant to the quote we just converted into an invoice. And if we go back over on our sales overview page now, and we refresh it, we should see that that quote now it's an invoice and it's in our awaiting payment screen. Any questions about converting quotes to invoices or on the custom template info? All right. Okay, so let's go and look at a couple other variations on invoices. So we just took a one-off quote, converted to an invoice. In Xero, you can also just create an invoice without going through the quote process, obviously. But we're not going to spend time doing that because it's pretty simple stuff. We're going to go over and show you some of the variations. one of these invoice variations is that we can create a group of identical invoices that go to different contacts at once. So we call this invoicing a contact group. And what it's going to do is Xero, we're going to create the one invoice, and Xero is going to create separate invoices for each contact in a group of contacts. So first thing is we want to group our contacts together. So we go over to contacts and all contacts, and then we're just going to pick some customers and say, this is our group for our summer startup. These are the clients or customers that always have their pools opened at the beginning of the season. We're just going to grab these. We're going to add them to a group called Summer Startup. So let's add them to this group. So first thing we have to do is create a group of contacts. And we can see that group down here, and we can, add or modify as needed. Back over in the invoice screen, under New, down at the bottom, there's Invoice to Contact Group. So this just showed up because now we have a group. And it'll give you an option for every group that you have in contacts. We're going to create a summer startup, and it's going to be for opening your pool. So this is our summer startup invoice we're going to send to each of the folks in the group. And what we're going to do is, it's not giving us an approve screen here or approve button. It's just coaxing us to create draft invoices. So when I click that draft invoices button, Xero is going to take the information in that little invoice, and it's going to create a draft for each of the people in the group. They're drafts, so to keep you from creating lots and lots of active invoices accidentally, it's putting them in draft first, but we can just move them over to the awaiting payment tab by clicking the boxes to the left and then approve. And that will move them over into now our awaiting payment, where they can be emailed or sent. Okay. I'll show you a little bit about some options when you do email your invoices. So I can send it to elephanttraining@gmail. This is our default invoice email that we saw in the first hour. If you were with us, remember we changed our USD to the $, so that's showing up here. I want to point out these options at the bottom. When you create invoices or bills, as a matter of fact, you can attach files to them. You do that using this little PDF icon at the top. If you want to attach files to an invoice and also include those files along with the emailed invoice, you would click this button, check this box off. Include PDF attachment means that not only are you getting that link, which we saw with the James Buffett quote, you're going to get a link like that for the invoice, but if you click this include PDF attachment, it's also going to attach a PDF of the invoice. Mark as sent naturally, that's a default, makes sense, and send you a copy. So you can do all of those things over in invoicing. Okay, so we talked about creating one invoice for lots of people. Now I'm going to show you how to create a lot of invoices for the same contact, and that's under repeating invoices. We use this all the time in our firm. We do our accounting services almost exclusively on a fixed fee basis, monthly basis. So when we onboard a new client, we create an invoice that repeats for them that gets paid every single month. So we're going to create a new repeating invoice for our pool company. We're going to go new and repeating invoice. But we're going to do this every week because we are going to clean their pool every week. So I'm going to set up this repeating invoice template. So repeat this transaction every 1 week. Let's say I'm going to go ahead and start it on the 23rd. On Saturdays, we're going to do this. Due date is what it is. I can create an end date. So maybe we're just doing this through May. Create an invoice to Hotel Antigua. Reference, so that we can insert a placeholder. So if you were creating an invoice, often over and over again, you probably would want some sort of field that indicates which one it is. So like if you have more than one that's outstanding, you would know, is this for May, for June? In our case, it's each week. So we're going to insert a placeholder for the week. It's actually the week number. so that it's creating the reference there. Branding is what it is. And then we're going to do our weekly hula service. So this is our weekly pool cleaning. And this looks good to me. This is what we want to send to our client every week. I have to tell Xero what to do with it, and that's what these 3 radio buttons are. Do I want Xero to create a draft that I'm going to go back into later, approve and send? Do I want Xero to create an approved invoice but not send it anywhere? So we use this option when we have clients that are on auto pay, where we have maybe their credit card being hit every month automatically. I usually click this button because if I approve the bill and I send it to them, they'll try to pay it again. The payment's already been made. So I create the invoice in Xero and hold on to it. Or I can approve for sending, which means approve and send. So that's the one I'm going to do. And then, like the other screens we've looked at, when we tell Xero to send something, we confirm the email body. So when I built this course, I wanted it to be different from Xero certification because I wanted to put in, the tips and tricks that I had learned with Xero over the years. So here's one of those tips. This is an off-label use of Xero. If you ask Xero people, can you schedule an invoice to be sent on a later date? They would say no, there's no official way to do that. But we can use the repeating invoice feature to do just that. So let's say that I have an engagement with a client and I told them I'd bill them on the 1st of the month, and here we are sitting on the 19th of the month, and I know I'm going to forget to send them an invoice on the 1st. I can use this repeating invoice feature to pre-schedule the invoice to go out, and then I don't have to actually repeat it. I can set up the dates so that it goes out once and then it cancels, and that's like scheduling in advance. So repeat this transaction doesn't matter, but I'm going to say my invoice date, I want this to go out on the 1st, and whatever the due date is, and then my end date, I want it to stop on the 2nd. So I would go through this process and have Xero send an invoice out and then just never send it again. So this is going to be an invoice to James Hook for pool opening. And I'll just click approve, save, and that will send out the invoice just the one time. So even though it says repeating, we're not actually repeating it. Okay, let's talk about some other sales issues. One is credit notes. So 2 ways to create a credit note. If I am over on the main screen, the first is to go to new credit note. And I'm going to create a credit note. So you guys know a credit note would be an offset to an invoice. So I'm going to create a credit note for Bayside Resort. Apparently we sent them a faulty motor. So we need to credit one of their invoices. So we're giving this credit note for $100. And I'm going to hit the GL for equipment sales because that's what I originally billed. So this is a credit note. You can tell at a glance that something in Xero is a credit or the opposite of what you would think because the background is sort of this light yellow or beige. So that's like a visual clue for you to think, okay, well, that's the opposite of the normal thing. So even though this looks like an invoice and it's in the invoicing function, it's the opposite. So it's on a different background. And I'll click approve. And then what Xero is going to say is, okay, well, you have this credit note, which is fine. Would you like to apply it to one of the outstanding invoices? Which makes sense. So it shows me the, excuse me. It shows me the outstanding invoices for this client, and I'll go ahead and apply this to the first. And I'll say, well, my credit balance was 100. I used 100, so I have no more remaining credit. And if I go into my invoices and look at that invoice under awaiting payment, I should see there's it looks like a little sticky note on it. This is the one that has the credit note applied. So there's still a balance on that invoice, but we have applied the credit note. So it just shows us again visually that there's something a little bit different about it. Another way to create a credit note is to do it directly in the invoice that you are applying the note to. So if I go to my beachside hotel startup here, we were late, so we were going to give them a little $25 credit on this invoice. Under invoice options, add credit note. When I do a credit note from an invoice, it takes the entire invoice and flips it around to the credit note. But I'm not going to apply the whole amount. I'm only going to give them the $25 credit. So it's auto-populating the GL account, the description for me. I'm going to make that adjustment, only give them a credit for the $25 and click approve. And you'll see down here, the total invoice was $150 minus the credit note gives us the amount due. Okay, let me read your question again, Thomas, because what I'm about to show you may answer this. Okay, so Thomas is asking a question about an integration with Shopify. So Xero integrates with Shopify, and the Shopify is sending over sales information. So it's creating draft invoices in Xero. So okay, so when we talk about integrations, and this, I think I have this as my next slide. There are 3 ways that we can get sales data from another system outside of Xero into Xero. So we looked at that import, that invoice import file when we were creating, let me go back. Sales data that is generated outside of Xero and needs to be pulled into Xero, the way we get that data in is almost always an invoice, okay? We don't create, you could create a manual journal entry, I guess, but it would be really complicated. So what we do is, whether there's an integration or whether we are faking an integration by using an import file like we showed for the receivables, we're pulling over sales data from another system into Xero, okay? That makes sense. So we're doing that via an invoice because that's how we recognize sales in Xero. There are 3 different ways an invoice can come over from another system. The first is a fully paid invoice, and I don't remember exactly the way Shopify does it, which of these 3 I'm about to explain it does, but just hang with me and then we can do a follow-up question if needed. A fully paid invoice means that the originating system sends over to Xero all of the sales data for, it's usually done by day, sends over the sales data for the day along with the payment of that data. So here's an example. We have an invoice, and usually the point of sale system or the e-commerce system will give us a reference that gives us some clue that this is the sales for 11/16/18. It sends over this date and says, okay, on this day we sold 33 of this kind of golf ball, we sold 20 of this kind of golf ball, which that gives us good data in Xero about what the sales were. And then it says that those sales were paid, because people are, if we're talking about an e-commerce system or a retail store, people are paying as they leave the store, either with a credit card or cash or check. So we're just recognizing the day's sales using an invoice and then also saying, well, it was paid. Somehow it was paid. We're not sure how exactly, like what the division of the payments was, but it was paid. When this happens from another system, in general, that payment is going to a clearing account. So think about what's going to actually happen on the bank. And I think this is part of your question, Thomas. We're going to get deposits that are going to hit the bank. And so we're going to have some merchant deposits from the credit card companies. We might have some cash deposits. But at some point, we are going to collect $663.15 minus merchant fees, but we'll ignore that for now. So for the ease of matching up deposits and merchant deposits to this day's sales, a fully paid invoice will generally say this 663 goes to a clearing account, and then those deposits as they come through the bank we can also hit the clearing account, and in theory, they'll clear. Okay, so a fully paid invoice is sending over the day's sales and also the idea that they've been paid. A $0 invoice is almost the same thing, except that instead of the payment being shown down here, there's actually a reversed line within the invoice that hits the point of sale, the clearing account. Okay, so these two have the same effect. They are crediting the sales account on the GL for the day's sales, and then debiting a clearing account that will later be offset by bank deposits. Either of these will work, and it'll be just fine. The one I don't like is when when POS systems or e-commerce systems send over unpaid invoices, because then you have to match. So this creates a little bit of a mess because we are recording the day's sales, but the 663 is going to end up in awaiting payment on our accounts receivable screen that we were just looking at. And it's not awaiting payment. Like, we got the money, we got the cash or the credit card because they left with the merchandise. So there shouldn't be a timing difference there other than how long it takes for us to get the deposits to clear. So in this case, we would actually have to go through the bank and figure out a way to match to the unpaid invoice because we've got to get these invoices cleared. I think your question is that Shopify is sending these draft invoices over. So whether you should delete them or not from draft, it depends on how you're recognizing the sales. My suggestion would be no, you would want to leave those invoices in Xero because Shopify is sending you down detailed data per day. So it's going to show the gross sales. And if you have a client that's got different sales accounts for different products, you want to keep that detail. You want it to be mapped to the right GL. Otherwise, if you delete those draft invoices from Shopify, then all you're working with is going to be the bank deposits. So your bank deposits are not going to be as detailed as this because you're going to just be hitting a sales account. And then you're going to have to back out your merchant fees. So does that answer your question, Thomas, or do you have any follow-up questions to that? If you want more information about this, Patty Scharf with Catching Clouds Academy, she's got a lot of YouTube videos on how to deal with e-commerce platforms. I think she does it for Shopify and for A2X. And I think most of what she has is available just straight on YouTube. She's awesome. Their practice in Colorado is exclusively e-commerce, and she's a friend, and she's really, really smart, and she's very generous to put that information out. So I would search for her videos. Okay, let's talk about paying bills. So from our dashboard, business and then purchases overview is going to look pretty much like the sales dashboard. We have the same 4 buckets, and they mean the same things. Awaiting payment is the GL balance. And then if we had some data in here, we would see a timeline of when our purchases were due. We also have purchase orders at the bottom, which would be basically the bill equivalent of a quote. It's purchase orders. We can do that through Xero as well. But we're not going to cover that again because it's really identical to the invoicing side. We are going to create some bills though, because we are going to show you how to pay those bills with checks. So let's just create a couple of bills so we have a few things to play with. We're going to pay our internet bill, which in New Orleans is Cox. So I'm just going to hit the +0 for the date that it's due. Internet. So I'm just creating bills. Now, if you have, if you're using your debit card or a bank draft to cover expenses, you don't have to go through the process of creating a bill. I see this a lot with new users. They want to create a bill for every expense. You don't have to. The only reason you're creating a bill is if you need to create a check, or if it's a true payable, like we're doing it in batches and there is a timing difference between the time we get the bill from the client, from the vendor, and then we pay them, then we're going to want to pull it through the accounts payable system. So I'm just creating a couple so we have something to play with. So Entergy Let's say this was back on the 5th, and it's due on 20 days later. Utilities, okay. So however you get bills in, you could use a third-party system like Receipt Bank, Bill.com, HubDoc to get those bills in. But if I go to my purchases overview, I will see I have 2 bills awaiting payment for a total of $350. So what we normally do on the clients that we do manual, when we have we have a list of payables, and if we in the office do the payables manually, not using something like Bill.com, our workflow would be something like getting all the bills in, and then every other week sorting for due date. So remember I told you that everything that's blue in Xero you can click on. when it's a header, clicking on it will sort. So sort by due date, we're going to pay both of these. So I can create a batch of checks by clicking the boxes to the left and going to make payment. So you can use Bill.com to do this, but we're just going to go old school with paper checks and go pay by check. And this is going to create and print checks for us. It's really important that we select the correct bank account. So we want to make sure we're pulling our checks from the right checking account, not our savings or our PayPal. Check numbering, we could say our next check is actually 1201. It's going to reorder the check numbers. If we were paying more than one bill from the same vendor, it's going to show us that here, and we could click on it to see which bills were being paid. We can easily add the address, which is helpful if you use window envelopes. You're going to want to make sure that there's an address there. And when we add it, Xero is not only going to put it on the check, but it's going to go back and put it in the contact, so we don't have to do that again. And then we're going to save and print when we're ready to print our checks. In Xero, when we tell Xero to print something, I'm using my air quotes, when we tell Xero to print something, what it does is it gives us a PDF download. So here are the checks that I have created. I just run this over check stock in my printer, and I'm good. If I go back over to business and checks, we'll see a check register of the checks we have printed. Let me show you how to format your checks, because this gives people a lot of grief. So under, it is under org name, settings, and check styles. If I go to options and edit, and I can have more than one check style, by the way, just like I can have more than one branding theme for invoices. If I have checks for different checking accounts, I can have a check theme for each of those, or check style. So this is what our layout editor looks like for paper checks. The default is one check per page with a check at the top and 2 vouchers underneath, but we can change that if we need to, or we can do 3 checks with no vouchers. In the US, we generally use pre-printed stock, so I would switch that over to pre-printed stock. I can change my font if I want. These are the fields that are going to populate on the check body. In the US, since we're using pre-printed stock, we probably do not want to include the company logo, company name, address, bank name, address, or check number, because these are going to be things that are already on our check stock. So we want to remove those. And then with what's left over, to reformat, we just drag and drop. So you would just drag and drop these, and I would print this on plain paper until you got it right. I'd print it on plain paper, hold it up against your check stock until the alignment is correct, and then roll with it. Then you should be good going forward. The voucher, again, we can also decide which fields we want to populate on our checks. All right, last thing I wanted to show you is about billable expenses. So when we pay a bill, so we are paying something, if we need to recoup that from a client, a customer, we can mark it in the system as a billable expense, meaning we are paying it, but we want to bill it back to the client at some point. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to create this new bill. So I'm the pool company. I'm buying salt on behalf of my client. I'm going to bill back for it. So Smith Salts. And let's say I'm buying 3 bags at $10 each. On my financials, it's going to be cost of goods sold, right? So when I pay the bill, it's going to go to cost of goods sold. I want to assign these expenses to a customer. So I want to make sure that next time I do an invoice for Ann Bonnie, that I don't forget that she owes me for these salts. So I'm going to click this and I'm going to hit assign, and it's going to populate her name next to the line. So if you had more than one line on the invoice, you could assign them to different folks. And I'll hit OK, and I can see that this line has been assigned to Ann Bonnie because of the little note underneath it. Let's approve it, and let's show you what happens when we go to create an invoice for her later. And you know what? I use this all the time with my law firm clients. So we use this for customer, for client costs. Does anybody have law firm clients? Raise your hand if you have any law firm clients. So the weird thing, there's a couple weird things about law firms, but one of them is that you have to, a lot of times the lawyers will pay in advance, but it's called advanced client costs or client cost receivable. They'll pay costs like court fees or records requests on behalf of a client, but they need to bill it back to the client. We use billable expenses to indicate that. So if I create a new invoice for Ann Bonnie, I guess sometimes this has been a little bit wonky. It didn't work, and then it worked when I was going through the practice, but it will show a like billable items to be added. So let's get out. I don't know if it maybe just takes a second. There we go. I think it just takes a second. Now we see one billable expense can be added to this invoice. So now I'm on the invoicing side. I previously paid for the salts. Now I'm going to invoice Ann, and I can go to invoice bills that can be added and add items. And I could change the price if I want. It's pulling in the price I paid, but we can charge her, a markup or whatever. But it's a good way to keep a running list of clients that owe us for expenses. It's a really useful function. I have on the screen my email address if you have questions about these 2 sessions. Part 3 will be bank rec, so a lot of bank rec. And then part 4 is going to be reporting and some other advanced tools. So if you have any questions in the meantime, you can feel free to send me an email. And for those of you who are not coming back, thanks for joining us. For those of you who are, I will see you tomorrow morning. Thanks. Take care.